Welcome to the Writing 2 presentation on planning and preliminary research. This lesson will combine several shorter lessons that seem to kind of fit together and flow well. And we'll be using the How to Write Anything book, and you'll see specific places listed in the slides to come. Learning how to plan out a research paper properly is a really significant skill, and hopefully we all got a lot of chances to do that in writing one. But sometimes students work or maybe struggle through writing one and they're able to kind of piece things together and they don't have to really plan out a long-term project very much. And then writing two comes along and there's a longer-term project with a lot more pages, and students freak out a little bit, and it really helps to learn how to do some basic planning. So I'm including that here in this lesson, in this chapter here early on in the course, so we can get at this. And as we see in our books here, in the How to Write Anything books, if you look at the screen and look at the slides in the PowerPoint presentation, you'll see specific chapters and pages that relate to this. One of the best things you can do is make yourself a schedule. And I know I do this for a lot of the projects that I have to do. I have to do a lot of projects with my job related to teaching and other administrative duties, and making a schedule really helps, especially for a bigger, longer-term project. And we can see in the book an example of that someone's written out. They've written it more in a checklist form where they put a date as sort of a heading and then have items underneath that as a checklist. And I try to structure the course so that you can kind of do this and look through the course and see what steps need to be done at certain times. You can certainly look at the course schedule to do that, and you can look at the different weeks and units and piece that together as well. And I recommend that you make one of these for yourself as you work through this project and then other writing projects and other classes. And again, another strategy that helps with planning a research paper is to also know that you have a certain amount of work that needs to get done by a certain date, and don't really give yourself any slack on that. Now, sometimes you do want to plan a little bit of lead time in with something, or if you know that something's coming up, for example, one of your buddies is getting married, or you know that you have a big game coming up, or several games in one weekend. Look at that, plan around that. Make sure that your life and your paper and everything kind of fits together, and that way that'll help with some of the crazy surprises that come along. You also want to then use a working bibliography. And again, you'll want to look at the page numbers on the slide for where you can find this in the Ruskowitz book, and flip to that page accordingly. Working bibliography is really going to help you with a longer term project. And again, some students in writing one and other projects kind of get through and they piece things together without really having a big strategy like this, but it's really going to help for this paper if you do use a working bibliography and sort of annotate some sources as you make your research pile grow. One of the nice things about a working bibliography, and that is having a list of sources that you're using, and kind of make some notes about them as you go along. And again, it's a work in progress, hence the term working bibliography. The nice thing is that you can kind of come back to that. So if your paper decides to sort of take a new direction, or you find yourself later on having to add some more content, you can go back and look over what you've done so far, and then you're not starting all over from scratch. The other nice thing about a working bibliography is that, again, when you do encounter little bumps in the road, you're not, completely lost in, panicking over it. You can look and know where you're at in the process, know what you've looked at already. You've made some notes that help you get some ideas, and you can go from there. Remember, too, to use research questions and think about, those topics that you're coming up with, not just in terms of report, because you're not just reporting here. You're asking questions and you're digging into them. So form some questions early on, and especially in the local research piece that's also part of this lesson. It's a separate presentation now, but you can look at that for some examples on different topics and ways to sort of dig into those. But start forming some questions early on in your research so that as you're asking yourself something about a topic, then you know what you're looking for. You're not just randomly trying to find specific information, because usually then you'll end up with general information and it won't work really well. So form those research questions, and those will help you early on, and then as you start transitioning into bigger parts of your paper and the next steps, it'll be smoother sailing for you. Get started on your research paper, you'll want to do what's called preliminary research. This is research that might not be quite as focused and direct as some of the later research that you'll do, but this will get you the basics. This will introduce you to some of the ideas, and this will help give you some good ideas on how to focus and narrow your topic down. So let's talk about a couple good strategies for this. One approach, especially for the papers you'll be doing in writing 2, to just look up some examples, some news stories perhaps, or some magazine articles that just cover the basics of the topic. So for example, you might have an idea that you want to do something about a drug problem in a certain area, for example. So you might just look around for some news stories that illustrate that. You might find some basic information about the drugs that you're going to write about. I wouldn't just write about drugs in general. You want to talk about specifics. And so you get the basic information about those things. You might also start looking at, okay, well, what are the causes of some of these problems? What other issues often go along with them in an area? So that's some preliminary research. Once you start answering those questions, you can move on to your more focused research. I do realize that for some students, this part that we're calling preliminary research often is as far as you ever get in writing 1. And, writing 1 is all about building skills, and that's fine. With writing 2, we're going to get more in depth with our research. We're going to dig a little deeper, and we're going to build more specific cases. We'll get to some strategies on that here in a few minutes. As you start looking through some basic materials and early preliminary research, you want to pay attention to the specific terms being used. Often students really struggle with later research because they're not using terms, or they're not aware of terms that people in those fields actually use. Oftentimes in academic research, they'll have very specific terms that they're using. Some of them are academic, some of them are not. Some of them are even silly terms that just end up getting thrown around. But you need to start introducing yourself to those terms and understanding what those mean and how you can use those for research. Likewise, you need to think about the terms that you might use for things and ask yourself, well, what's a more official way or a more academic way of putting this? I've had some students do papers on meth, for example. That's meth. It's a drug, and it's a big problem around here. Well, these students will go to do their research about meth, and they'll just type in meth. Well, meth is shorter for another word, methamphetamines, and oftentimes students don't realize that they're probably going to be doing research specifically on crystal meth or crystal methamphetamines. Preliminary research is a good time to get yourself more familiar with these terms and think about how you can expand your search. You also want to start using reference works. These are things like encyclopedias, and even we'll talk for a minute about Wikipedia. Reference works, the idea is that they are quick things that you can reference. The point of reference works like encyclopedias or even dictionaries are just very basic explanations, definitions, fairly limited explanations of things that aren't really going to get too far in depth. You don't really want to use many of these, if any at all, for your really focused research, but they're good to get a general background on something. For example, let's say you want to do a paper about the needs of children with disabilities in Marshall County. Well, maybe you have some experience or general knowledge of that. Maybe you don't. But it would be helpful for you to, number one, start thinking about what some of those specific disabilities and needs are. And then number two, start doing some basic background research on what those things mean. What are part of these disabilities as far as the disease goes? If there's a disease involved, what are some of the basic needs? Again, what are some are the other terms that people use to describe these disabilities? And even what are some of the organizations that work with these people who have disabilities? And by making a specific step where all you do is gather the really basic background information, that will help you be better educated as you do your more focused research. Wikipedia is an example of a reference work, and the founders of Wikipedia even said that that was their main goal, is to make it like in a living, breathing encyclopedia, not something for use for really heavy research. I'm sure most of you realize that Wikipedia is very, very popular, and many students use it even when professors tell them not to. So in every class, I like to take just a couple of minutes to explain how to use it properly if you're going to use it for research. Number one, it should not be a major source that you use. In fact, I really should not be seeing Wikipedia pop up in your works cited pages, or if you're doing an APA format, your references page. That doesn't mean you plagiarize and not mention it at all, even if you do get a lot of your content. And we use Turnitin, and believe me, anytime you use Wikipedia, if you're copying content, even just a sentence or so, it'll show up in Turnitin. Since Wikipedia gets so much use, however, I like to take some time to talk about how to use it responsibly. The example we'll use is a search on developmental disabilities. Again, maybe for your paper, you're talking about needs for people with developmental disabilities who live in Marshall County. And you might be trying to come up with an idea, okay, I want to do my research paper about this developmental disabilities, and I'm going to focus on Marshall County, but I don't really know where to go from here, or what to focus on, or even really much about what that means. If that's the case, then Wikipedia might be a good place to start at least looking for some resources. Again, Wikipedia should not be a major resource for you, but it's a way of leading you to better sources and more credible sources. Looking at the screen in front of you, you'll see part of a screenshot from an article about developmental disabilities. I took the screenshot quite some time ago, so it may not be exactly as you would find it today. That's one of the other weaknesses of Wikipedia. But you can see there in the general article, you can see there's some interesting, good basic information, and next to certain parts of the information, at the end of the sentence or even after a word, you'll see these little numbers. If you click on those in an actual Wikipedia page, those little numbers will actually take you to references down at the bottom of the Wikipedia page. And those references are actually the gold mine. Those are what you really want to be looking for if you're ever going to use Wikipedia, other than to get some basic understanding or basic definition of something just for your own mind, or to look for terms that get used a lot in that field. That's another great use of it. The most important use of Wikipedia is finding those other sources down in those references. Sometimes you'll see a section that says further reading as well. And down there, you'll find some really good, credible sources. Sometimes you'll find some academic or scholarly journals referenced. Usually you can't link directly to those, but you can take the authors or titles or other things and look for those in your periodical database available to you through our college. Many students have found some really good success doing that. Now we've looked at a couple of examples after we've talked about how to do some local research and how to use scholarly research to apply toward local issues. Of course, before that, we talked about even preliminary research and a good plan for putting together research papers. Your instructor in the Writing Center, we're really always happy to help you every step along the way. And we're glad to help you brainstorm or get your research started, or when you get stuck, you've got some research but you need more, or when you're trying to find that perfect piece of research and you know it's out there but you're not sure how to find it. We're here to help you discover connections and develop your thoughts every step of the way throughout this research paper. Just come talk to me or talk to the Writing Center. Whether you are an on-campus student or one of our online students in this course, you're welcome to take advantage of these resources. And of course, if you're online, obviously, I'm happy to meet with you in person at any time you'd like. In many ways, your paper that you choose to write will be unique and different from papers that other people write, but you're still going to struggle with some of the same things that I and the Writing Center folks have a lot of experience overcoming. And for us, it's very natural and very enjoyable to help you through this. So don't hesitate to contact us.